The gate agent didn't even look up when she said it. "Sir, you'll need to step aside. This seat isn't available for you." Her tone was crisp, final, the kind used when you've already decided the other person doesn't belong. Earl Whitaker had heard it before. 50 years ago, it came from a different face, in a different airport. But the meaning was the same. And this time, his granddaughter was standing right beside him. She wasn't just a passenger, she was the largest private shareholder the airline had ever had. What happened next would unfold mid-air, with an entire cabin as witness, and would force the airline to change forever before the plane even touched down. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Drop it in the comments and make sure you subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard, remembered, and passed on. Let's begin. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside." The gate agent's voice was polite in tone, but sharp at the edges. The kind of sharp that could slice skin. Earl Whitaker, 81 years old, pressed navy blazer, polished shoes, paused mid-step on the jet bridge. In his right hand, he held a leather ticket wallet. The boarding pass inside read First Class, Seat 2C. "This line is for premium passengers only," the agent added, motioning toward the economy queue. Earl adjusted his glasses. "I am a premium passenger. First class, New York." The agent's eyes flicked from Earl's dark skin to his scuffed but well-cared-for briefcase. Her smile tightened. "May I see your ticket?" He handed it over. She studied it longer than necessary, lips pressing together as though expecting the ink to rearrange itself into proof she was right. This says first class," she murmured, as if reading an improbable claim. "It does," Earl replied. His voice was calm, almost gentle. From the other side of the boarding lane, a younger woman had stopped mid-scroll on her phone. Nia Whitaker, late 30s, tailored charcoal suit, silver hoop earrings, watched the exchange. She didn't move forward. Not yet. The agent tapped her monitor, frowned. "Sir, the system shows you're an 18B. Coach." "That's not correct," Earl said evenly. "The ticket was purchased 6 weeks ago." A man in line behind him muttered, "Maybe he just wandered up here." Another passenger glanced at Nia, then back at Earl. Two people began filming quietly with their phones. "I'm not sure how this happened," the agent continued, "but we'll get you seated in the right section. Please step over to, I'll be taking my assigned seat, 2C, Earl said. His words weren't loud, but something in his tone made three people look up from their boarding passes. The agent's expression shifted, patient but patronizing. "Sir, sometimes people confuse the seating codes. It can be tricky if you're not used to." "That won't be necessary," Nia said suddenly. Her voice carried over the murmur of the boarding line. She stepped forward, badge lanyard swinging from her hand. "Is there a problem?" The agent hesitated. "This gentleman's ticket isn't matching our system." Nia's gaze went from the boarding pass in the agent's hand to her grandfather's face. "Run it again." "I just did," the agent replied. "Run it again," Nia repeated, softer now, but with a calm that made the nearby man filming straighten in his seat. Behind the counter, the printer spat out a reprint. The seat still read 2C. "That's impossible," the agent said, more to herself than anyone else. "Or it's not," Nia murmured. A flight attendant in a crisp navy uniform appeared in the doorway to the jet bridge. "We have to keep the line moving," she said to the agent. "This passenger isn't cleared for first-class seating," the agent replied. Earl looked past both of them, down the narrow aisle visible through the open aircraft door. "I've been in that seat before," he said quietly. "Years ago, they asked me to leave then, too." The words hung there. The attendant shifted uncomfortably. Nia turned to her grandfather. "You never told me that." Earl shrugged one shoulder, eyes still steady. "Wasn't worth telling at the time." From behind them, a voice female, mid-40s, called out, If the ticket says first class, let the man sit in first class. Several heads turned. The cameras kept rolling. The agent's cheeks colored. Ma'am, please mind your own. Nia's phone buzzed in her hand. She didn't look at it yet. Instead, she took the boarding pass back from the agent, examined it, then handed it to her grandfather. Go ahead, Granddad, she said. I can't clear him, the agent protested. You'll want to, Nia replied. She still hadn't raised her voice. The attendant frowned. And why is that? Nia finally glanced at her phone, one new message. A name lit up the screen. She smiled without humor, slid the phone back into her pocket. You'll find out, she said. Earl stepped forward, boarding pass in hand. The agent's hand twitched toward the scanner, then stopped. For a moment, the jet bridge was silent, except for the hum of the air unit. Then someone whispered, "Who is she?" A man in a business-class blazer muttered, "Doesn't matter. She's not letting this go." Nia shifted her stance, one heel slightly forward, as though settling in. Her grandfather's slow, deliberate walk toward the aircraft door felt like the opening move in a match nobody else realized had started. The first-class cabin was already half full when Earl stepped inside. Heads turned, some curious, some disapproving. He moved slowly down the aisle, ticket held just high enough for the attendant at the galley to see. Seat 2C, weighted by the window-crisp white headrest cover, glass of sparkling water already on the armrest. "Sir, are you sure?" The attendant began, but Nia was right behind him. "He's sure," she said, sliding his carry-on into the overhead bin before the woman could finish. Earl sat. His posture was relaxed, but his hands rested on the armrests like they belonged there, which they did. Nia didn't sit yet. She glanced down the aisle, catching sight of the gate agent now in hushed conversation with the second attendant. Their eyes kept flicking toward her. A man in 3A leaned into the aisle. Mid-50s, expensive watch, the kind of face that had opinions about everything. They tried to bump him? Nia's gaze met his. Something like that. He smirked, almost approving. They do it all the time, usually to folks they don't think fit the look. Another voice, quieter, came from the row across. That's exactly what it looked like. The murmurs spread, a low ripple through the front of the cabin. Nia finally slid into her own seat. 2D. The attendant hesitated, then leaned in. "Ma'am, the gate agent asked me to verify your party seating." "You just did," Nia replied without looking up, scrolling through her phone. The attendant lingered, then retreated. Her phone screen reflected in the dark window beside her. One open thread read, "Board in progress. Situation being monitored." She locked it before anyone could see more. Row 1's curtains swayed as another crew member stepped through from economy, whispering something to the lead attendant. Both of them glanced at Nia and Earl before disappearing back through the curtain. Earl poured water from the waiting glass into his own travel mug, a habit from years of long flights. Nia watched him with a small smile. "You knew this might happen," she said quietly. "I knew it could happen," he corrected. "Didn't expect it to. Not today." Her phone buzzed again. She read it, typed a short reply, then slipped the device under a folded magazine. From behind, a woman's voice, row 4, aisle carried forward. "Is that his daughter?" "No, granddaughter," someone whispered back. "She looks connected," the first voice said. Connected wasn't the word most people would have chosen. Composed, maybe. Untouchable. Like she'd been here before. Not as a passenger, but as someone checking a box on a long to-do list. Nia crossed one leg over the other and checked her watch. The second hand swept in perfect silence. She tapped the glass face twice, as though syncing herself to its rhythm. Another whisper drifted up from row 3. "You see that bag? That's a Whitaker Industries issue. My company used to work with them." The man beside him frowned. "Bigger. Logistics. Real estate. energy contracts. And she. The sentence trailed off as the attendant returned, kneeling beside Naya's seat. Ma'am, the captain would like a quick word with you and your grandfather before departure. Nia's eyes lifted slowly from the magazine. We'll speak after we're airborne. The attendant's mouth opened, closed. It's about seating compliance. Then we'll speak after we're airborne, Nia repeated, her tone unchanged. The attendant stood, hesitated, and walked back toward the galley. Earl glanced at her. You're making them nervous. They're making themselves nervous, she replied. Her phone buzzed a third time. She read the new message, then tilted the screen slightly so Earl could see. It was only a line. Conference call ready when you are. He nodded once. 2 rows back. A young man pretending to check email had his camera angled just enough to catch the exchange. He typed something quickly. On social media, a new post appeared. Something's happening in first class. Woman in 2D is running the show. In the galley, the curtain twitched again. The captain stepped halfway into the cabin, scanning the first 2 rows before focusing on Nia. His expression was neutral, but his stance, arms crossed, feet planted, said this conversation wasn't over. Nia didn't look up. Not yet. She reached into her tote and pulled out a slim leather portfolio, flipping it open to reveal neatly tabbed documents. She skimmed 1 page, made a note in the margin, then closed it again. The captain lingered a moment longer, then disappeared back through the curtain. Beside her, Earl exhaled slowly. 15 minutes until pushback. 15 minutes, Nia echoed. She set her phone face down on the armrest, fingers resting lightly over it as though expecting it to ring at any moment. From across the aisle, the man in 3A was still watching. You're not just letting this slide, are you? Nia finally met his gaze. Do I look like I let things slide? He chuckled, a little nervously now. Didn't think so. The engines outside whined as ground crew prepared the aircraft. Inside, the murmurs continued speculation, quiet guesses, the faint hum of anticipation that something unusual was unfolding just out of sight. In seat 2D, Nia Whitaker sat perfectly still, the calm center of a tightening circle. Whatever was coming next, she already had it in motion. The seatbelt sign was still off when the hum of the cabin settled into a low, uneasy quiet. Earl gazed out the window at the rain streaking across the glass. The smell of brewed coffee drifted forward from the galley, but no one in first class seemed to notice. They were too busy glancing toward row 2. Naya's phone, face down on the armrest, began to vibrate. Once, twice, a third time. She lifted it without urgency, glanced at the screen, and accepted the call. Put her through, she said simply. No hello, no introduction. Earl shifted slightly, listening without appearing to. The man in 3A leaned just enough to catch a few syllables. A female voice came through, tinny over the line. We've got the full board waiting. Timeline? Nia's tone stayed even. 15 minutes. I'm still on the ground. The voice hesitated. You want me to stall? Not yet. Give me 5, then start without me. In the galley, the lead attendant froze mid-step, catching fragments as she passed. She glanced back at Nia, eyebrows pulling together. Nia didn't lower her voice. She wasn't hiding the call, she was controlling the room with it. Yes. Tell him the asset review stays in draft until I say otherwise. Someone coughed in row 1. Another passenger adjusted their posture, pretending not to listen. She ended the call with 2 words. Stand by. Earl turned from the window. Board meeting? Not exactly, Nia replied, sliding the phone into her tote. But the effect will be the same. The engines whined, then quieted. A chime sounded overhead. The captain's voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been asked to hold for a few minutes due to a documentation check. Every head turned, first toward the front. then toward Nia and Earl. In the pause that followed, Nia opened her leather portfolio again, flipping to a page near the middle. She uncapped a pen, made a short notation, then closed it with deliberate care. The attendant from earlier appeared at her side, speaking in a lowered tone. "Ma'am, the gate supervisor is on the jet bridge. She'd like a word before we push back." Nia's answer was a soft, unhurried, "She can come to me." The attendant blinked, clearly unaccustomed to such a reversal. "I'll let her know." From 4B, a woman with a slim laptop whispered to her seatmate, "Do you know who she is?" "No," he replied, "but she's making them move around her, not the other way." 2 minutes later, a new figure appeared in the doorway, the gate supervisor, wearing the authority of someone used to ending problems, not negotiating them. She leaned slightly into the cabin. "Ms. Whitaker?" Nia looked up, expression unreadable. "We have a seating discrepancy we need to resolve before departure." Nia tilted her head, as if considering whether to respond at all. "And?" The supervisor glanced at Earl. "Your grandfather's boarding pass doesn't match our manifest. It matches mine," Nia said, "which is the only manifest that will matter in about 13 minutes. The supervisor's confidence wavered. "I'm sorry?" Nia reached into her tote, pulling out a thin, sealed envelope. She didn't open it, just held it between 2 fingers, resting it on the armrest. "You'll understand soon." The woman's eyes narrowed, but she didn't take the envelope. "Ma'am, we need him in coach until we sort this." "No," Nia said, still calm. "You need him where his ticket says he belongs, and you need to get your captain ready to depart on time. Every minute we sit here is going to cost you." That last sentence landed like a stone dropped in still water. The ripples reached the galley, the curtain to economy, even the last row of first class. The supervisor's mouth opened, closed. She stepped back onto the jet bridge without another word. The hum of speculation rose instantly. The man in 3A leaned forward again. "I don't know what game you're playing, but you're winning it." "I'm not playing," Nia said without looking at him. Her phone buzzed again, a message this time. She read it, lips pressing together. Earl noticed. "Everything in place?" She nodded once. "Good," he said, settling deeper into his seat. The captain reappeared moments later, speaking quietly to the lead attendant. His eyes flicked to Nia, then away, as though measuring something he couldn't quite see. From the far end of the cabin, a passenger muttered into their phone. "Something big's about to go down." They weren't wrong. Nia glanced at her watch. 11 minutes until the board call started without her. 11 minutes until she decided whether this airline would keep a contract worth more than anyone on this plane could guess. And she was in no hurry at all. The engines idled, a low mechanical hum vibrating through the floor. Outside, the rain streaked the oval windows, but inside, the air felt heavy, not with humidity, but with the collective sense that something was about to tilt. Nia tapped her phone awake. One thumbprint, a flick of her wrist, and a secure app bloomed on the screen. She scanned a brief line of text, then typed, "Proceed with the directive. Stand by for my signal." Across the aisle, the man in 3A pretended to read his tablet but kept sneaking glances. He noticed the app's interface, not a messenger, not email, something different. The lead attendant approached, voice soft but tense. "Ma'am, we're holding for clearance. The captain would like to keep this aircraft on schedule." Nia finished. She looked up, meeting the woman's eyes. "Which means this conversation will happen quickly and without removing my grandfather from his seat." The attendant hesitated. Passengers in the first 2 rows shifted subtly, their bodies angling toward the exchange. Nia placed her phone on the tray table, screen dark again, and leaned back. "You're operating under the assumption that your manifest is correct, and my boarding pass is not. That assumption will be expensive." The attendant blinked. "Expensive?" "Very." Nia's tone was neutral, almost bored, but the word landed like a gavel. At the forward galley, the captain stepped halfway into view, speaking low to the gate supervisor still on the jet bridge. She handed him a tablet, her lips tight. He scanned the screen, glanced toward Nia, then looked away quickly. Earl sat silent beside her, hands folded on his lap. But there was a glint in his eye now, the kind of satisfaction that comes from watching someone else take the wheel. The gate supervisor stepped into the cabin. "Ms. Whitaker, our records indicate that you're out of alignment with your own booking system," Nia interrupted. She nodded toward the captain. "If you check the back end, you'll see the transaction ID. Ticket purchased 6 weeks ago. Paid in full. No seat changes." The supervisor frowned, uncertain whether to be offended or curious. "And you know this. How?" Nia tilted her head. "Because I've reviewed more of your internal systems than you realize." That earned a murmur from row 4. Someone whispered, "Who is she?" Another voice answered, "She talks like she's on their payroll." The supervisor recovered quickly. "Regardless, we have a process. And I have authority," Nia said, still calm. Different processes, higher stakes. For the first time, the supervisor didn't reply immediately. The captain took a step closer. "Ma'am, we can settle this without making it more complicated." "It's already complicated," Nia replied. "The moment your gate agent attempted to downgrade a confirmed first-class passenger based on an incorrect manifest, you crossed into contractual breach." The word breach seemed to freeze the air. Several passengers who hadn't been paying attention now turned fully toward her. From the rear of first class, a woman in a gray shawl spoke up. "She's right, that's breach. I'm a lawyer." The captain's jaw tightened. He turned back to the supervisor. "What's the risk here?" he asked under his breath. The supervisor whispered something, but Nia caught the last words. "Corporate client. Millions. Annually." Her phone buzzed again. Without looking, she tapped the green icon and lifted it to her ear. "Yes." A male voice came through, crisp and direct. "We're ready on our end. Do you want us to proceed?" "Hold for 60 seconds, Nia said. "You'll hear from me when it's time." She ended the call, slid the phone into her blazer pocket, and folded her hands. The gate supervisor's tone shifted, less confrontational now, more cautious. "Ms. Whitaker, perhaps we can escort you both off briefly to discuss—" "We'll discuss it here," Nia said, "in front of the people who've been watching this unfold. Transparency seems appropriate." That drew a ripple of approval from the passengers. The man in 3A actually grinned. The captain's radio crackled. A clipped voice from operations. "Priority query from HQ. Verify if passenger N. Whitaker is on board flight 218 to New York." The captain glanced at Nia, then at the supervisor. She gave the slightest shake of her head. "Don't answer." Nia checked her watch. 30 seconds, she murmured to Earl. He nodded once, as if acknowledging an agreed signal. The lead attendant hovered near the galley, clearly aware that whatever was happening now had moved beyond her control. The supervisor finally broke the silence. "Miss Whitaker, who exactly do you represent?" Nia's gaze was steady. "I represent the entity that will decide in about 25 seconds whether this airline retains its single largest corporate travel contract." A collective inhale swept the cabin. Someone muttered, "That's what she meant by expensive." Nia's phone buzzed again. She didn't answer. She simply stood, smoothing the front of her blazer. "Captain, in about 10 seconds your operations center is going to call back. I suggest you take that one." The captain opened his mouth to respond and his radio erupted. "Captain, connect to secure line from corporate. Priority 1. He froze for half a beat, then turned on his heel toward the galley. Nia sat back down, her expression unchanged. "Systems," she said softly to Earl. "Once you know how to turn them, the rest follows." And from the way the cabin had fallen utterly silent, it was clear the turning had already begun. The captain vanished into the galley, headset already in place. The gate supervisor followed, speaking rapidly into her own radio. From row 3, a passenger angled her phone discreetly toward the aisle. The red live icon glowed in the corner of her screen. Her voice was a whisper to her viewers. Something's happening up here. The crew's acting different. 2 rows back, a man in a window seat tapped on his laptop. On his screen, a news alert was open. Whitaker Logistics, top-tier corporate travel client for multiple airlines. He glanced up at Nia, then down again, typing faster. In the aisle, the lead attendant brought 2 cups of coffee to the first row. Her hands trembled just enough to make the liquid ripple. She set one in front of Earl without a word. Nia took the other, lifting it in acknowledgement. "Thank you." The woman nodded quickly and retreated. At the jet bridge, another airline employee appeared, badge clipped high, expression pinched. She leaned into the galley doorway. "Operations wants confirmation. Is she the Nia Whitaker?" The captain said nothing. The headset pressed tight to his ear. In the cabin, murmurs built like low tide. "She's someone important. Look at how they're moving now. They don't want her upset." Earl sipped his coffee, gazed steady on the rain outside. "You've got their attention," he murmured to Nia. "That's just the first step," she replied. Her phone buzzed again. This time she lifted it for all to see. A short message in bold font. "Conference line active, 20 on the call. Your move." The man in 3A caught sight of it, his eyes widening. Overhead, the chime sounded once. The captain stepped back into the aisle. "Ms. Whitaker, HQ requests your presence on the jet bridge for a direct conversation." Nia didn't move. "They can speak to me here." The captain's jaw tightened. "They said it's sensitive. Then they should be prepared for witnesses." Her gaze swept the cabin, making sure every passenger heard it. In the back row of first class, a woman pulled her phone closer to her mouth. "You heard that? She wants it all out in the open." The captain hesitated. His radio crackled again. "Priority escalation. Client status confirmed. Proceed as instructed." That was the first crack. His shoulders dropped slightly as he turned toward the galley. "Bring the phone to row 2, he told the attendant. Seconds later, a cordless handset appeared in Nia's hand. She pressed it to her ear. "Go ahead." On the other end, a male voice, tight with urgency. "Ms. Whitaker, we verified your profile. We're aware of the situation. What's your position?" "My position," Nia said evenly, "is that my grandfather sits in the seat he paid for, and that your staff understands exactly why this mistake can't happen again." There was a pause. Papers shuffled in the background. Another voice joined the line deeper, authoritative. "Ms. Whitaker, this is Charles Denton, VP of Corporate Accounts. I know who you are," Nia cut in. "And you know how much your company bills mine annually. You also know I can move that contract elsewhere by the end of this call." A longer pause this time. Someone exhaled into the line. "Understood." In the cabin, the passengers were silent, straining to catch any fragment of her side of the conversation. Nia listened for another few seconds, then handed the handset back to the attendant. "They'll be calling you," she told the captain. As the attendant walked away, Nia reached into her portfolio, drawing out a slim folder. She slid it across to Earl. "You'll want to keep this visible." He glanced inside corporate letterhead, bold signatures, numbers in the millions. He closed it halfway, resting it on his lap like an afterthought. The whispers flared again. "What is that? Looks official. She's showing them proof." At the jet bridge, the gate supervisor's phone rang. She answered, listening in silence for nearly a full minute, before nodding sharply and disappearing toward the terminal. From somewhere in the economy, a voice called forward. "Are we leaving soon?" The captain stepped up to the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be underway shortly. Thank you for your patience." But his tone had shifted, less commanding, more deferential. Nia leaned toward Earl. Now they know who they're dealing with. The rest is execution. Outside, a baggage cart rumbled past. Inside, the rain softened against the windows. The cabin had changed, not in its physical layout, but in its balance. Every crew member who passed now glanced at Nia, not with suspicion, but with caution. And though no announcement had been made, everyone in first class could feel it. The stakes had just gone up, and she was holding the pieces. The captain returned to the galley phone for the third time in 10 minutes. His voice was low, clipped. Every few seconds he glanced toward row 2, as if confirming that Nia was still there. The lead attendant had stopped offering explanations. She moved quietly, eyes averted, every motion deliberate. Earl sat back in 2C, legs crossed, folder still resting on his knee. To anyone glancing over, it was just paper. To those who knew, it was a loaded trigger. From 3A, the man with the tablet noticed a new development. The gate supervisor hadn't come back. Instead, another uniformed figure had taken her place on the jet bridge. Tall, tailored navy suit, no name badge. Corporate. He whispered into his mic for the benefit of his live viewers. "There's an exec here now. This just jumped a level." The suited man stepped inside, scanning the cabin with professional detachment. His gaze settled on Nia. "Ms. Whitaker, may I speak with you privately?" "No," Nia said without looking up from her phone. The man hesitated. "It would be more appropriate." "Appropriate would have been seating my grandfather without incident," she replied. A ripple of quiet approval moved through the rows. The man adjusted his tie. "The company is prepared to make amends." Nia finally looked up. "Amends are for misunderstandings. This was procedure. Procedure tells me who you are, long before you open your mouth." The man's composure cracked just enough for the passengers to notice. Overhead, the chime sounded again. A message from operations came through the captain's radio. "Priority call from HQ. Connect to board conference line immediately." The suited man froze. "They're looping in the board?" Nia's phone vibrated in sync with the call. She answered, "Yes, I'm ready." A beat. Then she held the phone out toward the man in the suit. "You first." He blinked. "Me? They'll want your version before they hear mine," she said, "and they'll compare notes." The man took the phone, pressing it to his ear. "Yes, this is." He stopped. "Yes, she's here." "No, she hasn't." "Understood. I'll step aside." He handed the phone back without meeting her eyes. Earl leaned slightly toward her. "You're walking them into it. They're already in it," Nia said. At the far end of the jet bridge, the captain was now flanked by 2 more airline officials. One wore the badge of security operations. The other had a leather folder identical to Nia's. "Time?" she asked without looking up. Earl glanced at his watch. 90 seconds. Her fingers moved across her screen in quick, precise motions. An encrypted call connected, the faint tone audible to those close by. "This is Whitaker," she said. "Initiate the transfer protocol. Stand by on confirmation from my side." The lead attendant paused mid-step, eyes narrowing. In 4B, the woman with the laptop mouthed silently to her seatmate. "Transfer protocol? 60 seconds. The suited man shifted uncomfortably, the cabin too quiet now. Every small sound carried the click of Nia's pen, the soft hiss of the air vent, the faint tap of rain easing outside. 30 seconds. From the cockpit, the captain emerged with a satellite phone in hand. "Ms. Whitaker, it's the board chair." Nia didn't take it immediately. She glanced around the cabin, meeting the eyes of several passengers who had been following every move. "You've all been patient," she said. "I think you deserve to hear this part." She took the phone, pressing it to her ear. "Yes, I'm aware of the delay, and I'm aware of the breach. You have 20 seconds to tell me why I should maintain the contract after this call." A pause. The voice on the other end spoke quickly, urgently. Nia listened, expression unreadable. 10 seconds. Her gaze slid to the suited man still standing by the galley. "You'll need to stay for the next part," she told him. 5 seconds. She stood, smoothing her blazer, phone still at her ear. The captain's eyes followed her, the cabin holding its breath. The board chair finished speaking. Nia lowered the phone, not to hang up, but to let the words carry. "Then we're in agreement," she said, her voice level but resonant enough for row 5 to hear. She ended the call, slipping the phone into her pocket. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, sweeping her gaze across the cabin. "This is the last time anyone in this company decides who belongs in first class without looking at the ticket." The suited man opened his mouth, but she was already turning toward the galley. "And starting today," she paused just long enough for the silence to pull tight, "I'm the one who gives the orders." The corporate envoy in the navy suit was still standing in the galley when Nia stepped toward him. The captain moved instinctively to one side, as if making space for something larger than protocol. "Miss Whitaker," the envoy began, his voice carefully measured. "The board has authorized me to—" "Sit," Nia said. She gestured to the jump seat by the forward door. He hesitated, unused to taking orders in his own uniform, but he sat. Nia turned to the lead attendant. "We're going to need a table. Clear, row 1. Within seconds, the 2 passengers in row 1 had been relocated, their eyes bright with curiosity. The aisle was now a stage. From her tote, Nia withdrew a leather-bound folder, heavier than it looked. She placed it on the tray table, snapping open the brass clasp with a quiet click that seemed to cut through the hum of the engines. She looked at the captain first. "You've been with this airline. How long?" 14 years, he said. "And in that time, how many times have you checked the shareholder registry?" He frowned. "Never." "That's the problem," Nia said. She opened the folder to the first document, a crisp certificate bordered in deep blue. She didn't hand it over. She simply rotated it, so the captain, the envoy, and anyone nearby could read the header. Atlantic Continental Airways, shareholder ownership record. She tapped a line 3 paragraphs down. 22% stake. Held by Whitaker Global Logistics and its affiliates. Acquired 18 months ago. The envoy's face went rigid. "That information is not public." "It is now," Nia replied. Murmurs swept the cabin. Someone whispered, "She owns part of the airline." Another voice, "Second largest shareholder if that's true." Nia flipped to the next page, a signed purchase agreement. "My grandfather didn't just buy a seat today. We bought into the entire operation last year. Nearly a quarter of your company." The captain swallowed, glancing at the envoy. The envoy looked like he wanted to disappear into the bulkhead. She continued, voice steady. "Our investment came with conditions. Service-level guarantees, anti-discrimination clauses, oversight rights for all premium class operations." From row 3, the man with the tablet muttered, "Oversight rights? That means she can—" He didn't finish. Nia pulled a second folder from her tote thinner, but with a single sheet at the top marked in bold. Section 9.4, Material Breach Provisions. "This clause," she said, tapping the page, "allows a shareholder holding more than 20% to trigger an immediate governance review if the airline engages in actions that could materially harm reputation or contractual obligations." She let the silence hang for a 1 beat. "A public incident of discriminatory denial of service qualifies." The envoy spoke at last. "You're invoking the clause?" "I already have," Nia said. "The board call you just took wasn't a courtesy. It was notification." Gasps, a few sharp intakes of breath. Even in economy, people were standing in the aisle, craning to see. The lead attendant was frozen near the curtain, coffee pot still in hand. Nia shifted her attention to the captain. "You have a spotless safety record. That's why I'm speaking to you plainly. But today, Your crew operated in breach of both service guarantees and shareholder clauses. Which means, she tapped the document again, I now have authority to demand corrective action without delay. The captain's voice was quiet. What exactly does that mean? It means, Nia said, that in the next hour, this airline will begin implementing changes I dictate, or it will face an emergency shareholder vote to replace the CEO. The envoy's composure finally broke. You wouldn't. I will, she said, cutting him off. Because this isn't just about one flight. This is about a system that decided my grandfather didn't look like he belonged here, despite owning a piece of the very company that runs this cabin. The words hit like turbulence. Earl didn't move, but the faintest smile touched his lips. In the back of first class, a woman raised her phone higher, catching every word. Live comments rolled in. This is unreal. She's the boss. They're finished. Nia closed the folder with deliberate precision, the snap of the clasp punctuating the moment. I'm not here to humiliate individuals, but I will hold the system accountable. She turned to the envoy. You will confirm to operations, in writing, that the ownership clause has been activated. You will notify every member of the board that I will be issuing directives in 30 minutes. And you will start drafting the internal memo that explains why. The envoy opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded. The captain's radio crackled. HQ requests immediate status update on Whitaker directive. Nia glanced at her watch. We'll begin with crew protocol. But first, my grandfather stays in 2C. That's non-negotiable. Her gaze swept the cabin one last time, and in case there's any doubt, from this moment forward, I'm not asking. The cabin door was still open. Rain drummed softly on the jet bridge roof, the sound seeping in each time someone stepped through. But inside, the air was taut the kind of tension that hums before a storm breaks. Nia didn't sit. She stood at the front of the cabin, one hand on the headrest of 1A, the other holding her phone at eye level. Her voice was calm, but it carried. First order, she said, looking directly at the envoy in the Navy suit. Effective immediately. Crew training for premium cabins will include anti-discrimination modules drafted with external oversight. Non-compliance will result in disciplinary review. The envoy scribbled on a small pad, his pen moving fast. She turned to the lead attendant. You will make a note in the passenger log that Mr. Earl Whitaker was denied boarding in his purchased seat due to an internal error, and that this error was resolved only after shareholder intervention. That note will remain on file. The attendant swallowed, nodded, and reached for her tablet. From somewhere behind row 3, a man muttered, She's rewriting policy on the plane. Second order, Nia continued. Within 72 hours, the airline will issue a public acknowledgement of this incident. Not an apology to me. To the passengers, all of them for undermining the trust that your ticket buys you a seat. Not an interrogation. The envoy hesitated. That will require communications approval. It already has it, Nia said, without glancing up from her phone. Check your secure inbox. The man tapped at his own device, then froze. His eyes flicked up. This came from the board. Yes, she replied. Because when the ownership clause is active, I don't wait for approval. I'll give it. Earl shifted in 2C, setting the leather folder aside. You're making them rewrite the book while you're still in the room, he murmured. That's the point, Nia said softly. The captain approached, no longer trying to mask his caution. Ma'am, HQ confirms your directives are logged. They'd like to know your timeline for further action. Nia glanced at her watch. We'll depart on schedule. All additional directives will be issued mid-flight, so they can't forget them before landing. She turned to the passengers, her voice taking on a different edge, inclusive now, drawing them in. You've all been patient through this delay. What you may not know is that change, real change, rarely starts in a conference room. It starts when someone refuses to accept the default setting. Murmurs of agreement rolled through the cabin. From the economy, a woman called forward. What's going to happen to them? They'll adapt, Nia said. Or they'll be replaced. The envoy's pen slowed. He was watching her now with something between wariness and reluctant respect. Nia tapped her phone once more. Third order, effective on the next rotation. Any premium class passenger traveling under a corporate contract exceeding $1 million annually will have their booking cross-verified by 2 separate systems. No more manifest errors as an excuse. The captain nodded grimly. Understood. At that moment, the jet bridge cleared. The last of the ground crew stepped back outside, and the door swung shut with a heavy thud. The lock engaged. A small cheer rose from the back of first class, not for the departure, but for the feeling that something decisive had shifted. Nia moved back to 2B and sat beside her grandfather. You comfortable? Earl's smile was small but real. More than I was 15 minutes ago. She reached over, straightening his seatbelt. Good, because we're not just flying to New York. We're flying into a different operating reality for this company. From the galley, the envoy cleared his throat. Ms. Whitaker, one more question. Why make this public? You could have handled it quietly, behind closed doors. Nia met his gaze without blinking. Quiet fixes don't change the system. They just patch the leak, until the next storm. I'm not here to patch. The engine spooled up, a deep, steady roar filling the cabin. The lead attendant took her position at the front, eyes flicking to Nia as if recalibrating her entire understanding of the passenger list. As the plane began its slow pushback, Nia's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, then smiled faintly. Fourth order, she said aloud. Effective immediately. This crew will complete the remainder of the flight without further incident. That includes no attempts to reframe or downplay what occurred. Am I understood? The lead attendant nodded. The captain gave a short, respectful dip of his head. Earl chuckled under his breath. You've got 'em flying straight. They'll stay that way, she replied, fastening her belt as the aircraft turned toward the runway. Because now, the system remembers who's in the cockpit, even when I'm sitting in row 2. The seatbelt sign dinged. The engines roared higher. And with that, the reset was in motion not just for the flight, but for the company itself. At 37,000 feet, the seatbelt sign was off, but the cabin felt anything but relaxed. The clouds below stretched like a silent ocean, and the steady hum of the engines was the only sound until Nia stood. She didn't bother with the PA. Her voice carried down the narrow aisle, drawing glances from first class and the curious tilt of heads from economy. Fifth order, she said, turning toward the envoy still stationed in the forward galley. Within 10 business days, the airline will audit every premium class denial over the last 5 years. I want a full breakdown demographics, reason codes, and the name of the approving staff member on each case. The envoy's pen paused mid-note. That's thousands of files. Then you'd better start before we land, she said. From 3A, the man with the tablet was already typing furiously. The live comment streaming beside his feed read, "She's digging deep. This is systemic. History lesson incoming." Nia moved to the center of the aisle, steady despite the occasional bump. Sixth order. Customer resolution teams will be restructured. I'm assigning oversight to a joint panel that includes external civil rights advisors. Their findings will be binding. The lead attendant shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to watching her corporate chain of command be rewritten. At 35,000 feet, Earl sat back, hands folded over his chest, eyes following her every move. "You're setting traps," he said quietly when she passed him. "I'm setting guardrails," she corrected. "Traps are for catching people. Guardrails are for keeping them from falling in the first place." "From economy," a voice called forward, half joking but with an edge. "Can you fix the legroom too?" A ripple of laughter ran through the cabin, breaking the tension for a moment. Nia smiled faintly. One revolution at a time. She stopped at the galley again, leaning just enough toward the envoy that her words still carried. Seventh order. Premium boarding staff will be rotated across hubs to prevent localized bias patterns. No one stays in the same gate assignment long enough to build habits they shouldn't have. The envoy jotted it down, glancing up. That's going to cost millions. Nia's gaze didn't waver. So does losing a quarter of your shareholder base. Silence. Even the coffee machine's hiss seemed to pause. She stepped back toward her seat but stopped beside the captain, who had emerged from the cockpit for a stretch. Captain, I trust you understand the significance of these directives. I do, he said quietly. And I also understand the difficulty of making them stick. That's why you'll be my liaison for implementation, she replied. Because the next time I fly with this airline, I want to know the captain isn't just in charge of the aircraft, he's in charge of the culture on board. He gave a slow nod, the kind that carries more weight than any signature. Nia returned to 2B and sat beside Earl. She reached into her tote and pulled out a sleek black folder, thinner than the others. This, she said, opening it just enough for him to see, is the clause that makes every order today binding before we land. Earl raised an eyebrow. Enforcement? Enforcement, she confirmed. It's not enough to win the argument. You have to write it into the rules while the ink is still hot. The envoy approached cautiously. Ms. Whitaker, the board has acknowledged receipt of your first 6 directives. They would like to propose minor adjustments. She didn't look up. Tell them no, and tell them the 8th order is being finalized as we speak. What's the 8th? He asked, voice low. She smiled, without humor. Personnel. That word alone sent a new wave of murmurs through the cabin. From the back of first class, the woman with the phone whispered into her mic. She's going after jobs now. This is the final strike. The captain's radio crackled again, a clipped voice from HQ. Confirm 8th directive. Preparing compliance report. Nia didn't answer immediately. She stood once more, letting the moment stretch just long enough for everyone's focus to lock on her. When we land, she said, 3 senior staff members directly involved in this incident will be reassigned to non-customer-facing roles. This is not punishment, it's prevention. The envoy started to speak, but she held up a hand. And before anyone thinks about resistance, the board has already approved the reassignments under shareholder authority. There was no cheer this time, just a low, resonant hum of voices. The kind of sound people make when they witness something irreversible. Earl turned his head slightly, his voice pitched for her alone. That's checkmate. Nia sat back down, buckling her seatbelt as the seatbelt sign dinged again for turbulence. No, she said quietly. That's the opening move. Outside, the clouds thickened, the light shifting to a deeper gray. Inside, the system was no longer just running. It was running on her terms. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the engines, you could almost hear the old rules burning. The descent began over the silver-gray Hudson, the skyline of Manhattan emerging through a veil of mist. The captain's voice came over the intercom, even in practice, but with a faint edge of awareness. Everyone on this flight knew they weren't just arriving in New York. They were arriving after something had shifted. Nia remained seated, eyes on the window. Earl sat beside her, hands relaxed now, the leather folder tucked safely in his lap. The envoy appeared in the aisle, one hand braced on the overhead bin as turbulence rippled through the cabin. Ms. Whitaker, he said quietly. HQ has confirmed full compliance with all 8 directives. The board requests a debrief upon arrival. They'll get it, she said, still looking out at the skyline. In my office, not theirs. From behind, the man with the tablet leaned forward just far enough to catch her attention. You've got 1 million people watching live right now, he whispered. They're calling this the flight that changed first class. Nia didn't turn. Then they should know this isn't about first class. It's about who gets to write the rules. The lead attendant approached Earl, her posture different now, less defensive, more careful. "Mr. Whitaker, would you like a refreshment before landing?" Earl smiled, not unkindly. "I'd like to land, knowing the next passenger doesn't have to prove they belong." The attendant nodded, eyes down. "Yes, sir." The landing gear thudded into place beneath them. Passengers straightened, belongings stowed. But the cabin still hummed with that strange mix of adrenaline and reverence. As the plane rolled onto the tarmac, the envoy spoke again. "Ms. Whitaker, there's something you should know. The CEO was scheduled to meet with a prospective investor this afternoon. They've canceled. They're meeting with you instead." Nia finally looked at him. "Good. Saves me the trouble of scheduling it." The aircraft slowed, turning toward the gate. Through the window, Nia could see a small group waiting on the jet bridge suits, security, and at least one familiar face from the board. She unbuckled, standing smoothly despite the deceleration. Earl rose beside her. She glanced at him, voice softer now. "You ready for this?" He adjusted his jacket, the old dignity settling on him like a well-tailored coat. "I was ready in 1968. They just didn't see me coming until now." The forward door opened with a hiss. Nia stepped into the jet bridge first, the envoy trailing, Earl just behind. The air was cooler here, and the sound of the terminal seeped in footsteps, distant announcements, the murmur of a gathered crowd. A man in a dark suit stepped forward, hand extended. "Ms. Whitaker, the board is assembled. The floor is yours." Nia didn't take his hand. "The floor's been mine since the moment you let that door close behind me," she said, walking past him toward the conference room they'd converted near the gate. Inside, a long table gleamed under harsh fluorescent light. Every board member was already seated. A single empty chair waited at the head. Nia didn't sit immediately. She set the leather folder down, opened it, and slid the top document forward, the activation record for the ownership clause, time-stamped mid-flight. "This," she said, "is not a gesture, it's governance. And before we begin, I want each of you to acknowledge in writing that the directives issued today are permanent." The chair of the board, a woman with steel gray hair and an expression carved from years of corporate battles, studied Nia for a long moment. Then she reached for a pen. "So noted." One by one the signatures came. The envoy stood at the wall, watching as the weight of the airline's future shifted in ink and paper. When the last signature was down, Nia closed the folder. "Good. Now, let's talk about expansion. Because Whitaker Global isn't here to just own a piece of this airline. We're here to set the standard for how it treats every person who steps on board." Earl, seated at the side, let out a slow breath. In the reflection of the polished table, he could see his granddaughter steady, unflinching, and the echo of a younger version of himself, who once stood in a different line, holding a ticket no one would honor. The boardroom fell silent, waiting for her to continue, but Nia only smiled faintly. "The rest," she said, "you'll hear after we take care of something else." "What's that?" the chair asked. Nia looked at Earl. "We're going to walk him down the jet bridge, into the terminal, and make sure the world sees exactly who belongs in first class." They stood together, grandfather and granddaughter, and stepped back into the hum of the terminal. Cameras clicked, voices called, but through it all, the two of them moved forward without hurry, as if the ground beneath their feet had finally caught up to the truth. For the first time in decades, Earl didn't feel like he was boarding someone else's flight. This one was his. The press didn't wait for a press conference. By the time Nia and Earl reached the main concourse, the story was already moving faster than they could walk. Screens over the gates lit with news alerts. The words, "Shareholder activates clause mid-flight," scrolling in clean, unforgiving type. Earl didn't flinch at the cameras, though he never sought them. He walked with the same measured pace he'd kept for decades in boardrooms, on loading docks, through terminals that didn't always welcome him. But this time, the crowd parted. Not because security made them, but because something in the air told them they were watching a shift. At the end of the concourse, near the VIP lounge, a small podium had been wheeled out. A microphone waited. Nia didn't intend to speak. Not here. Not in the chaos, but Earl stopped. "You've said enough today," he told her quietly. "Now let me say something." She studied him for a moment, then stepped back. He walked up to the microphone without notes. The buzz of the crowd softened to a low current. "My name," he said, "is Earl Whitaker. I have flown on more airlines than I can count. I've sat in first class, I've sat in a coach, and I've stood on tarmacs in the rain waiting for someone to decide if I was worth seating at all." A few gasps from the younger passengers. A slow nod from someone who had lived long enough to know exactly what he meant. "Today," Earl continued, "my granddaughter reminded this airline of something simple. A ticket is not a favor. A seat is not a gift. And dignity is not conditional." He paused, letting the words rest in the space. "I am not here for vengeance. I am here for change. And thanks to her, change is not coming, it's here." When he stepped back, the applause wasn't polite. It was full, rising, a sound that filled the concourse until it seemed the glass walls might vibrate with it. Nia joined him, taking his arm. Together they moved toward the lounge, the envoy trailing at a respectful distance. Inside, away from the noise, Nia pulled a slim folder from her tote, the last one. "Final order," she said to the envoy. "This will be added to the company's official policy manual before midnight." He opened it, scanning the title page. The new manifest, Passenger Bill of Rights. 10 lines. Clear, plain, without the hedge of legal jargon. It spelled out exactly what every passenger could expect, and what no passenger would ever again be denied for reasons of bias or convenience. The envoy looked up. "You're publishing this? To the public?" "Yes," Nia said. "If you can't hold yourself to a standard in the daylight, you're not holding yourself to it at all." He nodded slowly. "It'll change more than just our airline." "That's the idea," she replied. Earl leaned back in his chair, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "It reads better than any boarding pass I've ever held," he said. Nia smiled. "Because it's not just a pass, it's a promise." Outside the lounge window, a new aircraft taxied into view, the same model they'd flown in on, but with a fresh coat of paint along its fuselage. The words were large enough to see even at a distance. "Whitaker Standard in Service." Earl chuckled, shaking his head. "Did you plan that?" "No," she admitted. "But I'll take it." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching ground crews move with quiet precision. The hum of the terminal was a background score to something larger, the sense that once a rule has been rewritten in plain sight, it can't easily be turned back. When they finally stood to leave, Nia glanced once more toward the busy gates. Families, business travelers, solo flyers, people boarding flights without realizing they were stepping into a new kind of contract. She didn't wave to the cameras or make another speech. The work was already written into the system, signed into the ledger, sealed in the culture of the airline. As they reached the exit, Earl's voice was low but certain. "You know they'll tell this story for years." "They should," Nia said. "Not because of what we did to them, but because of what we made possible for everyone else." They stepped out into the afternoon light, the city moving around them, and for the first time in a long time, both of them felt the same thing at the same time. Not victory, not vindication, ownership. "I want to thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. It's not just about a seat on a plane, or a company policy, or even a shareholder's power. It's about something far greater. The truth that dignity is non-negotiable, and that the smallest moment of courage can change an entire system." When I think about what happened on that flight, I think about every journey my family has taken, some in first class, some in the very back, and some where the door was never opened at all. Every single one of those journeys led to this moment, and now I want you to carry it forward. Speak up when you see wrong. Stand with those who are being pushed aside. And remember that change doesn't start in boardrooms. It starts when ordinary people refuse to accept the unacceptable. If this story moved you, share it. Leave a comment. Let's talk about it. Hit like, and most importantly, subscribe, so you don't miss the next story that might just shift the world a little closer to what it should be.